All right, let's get to it. We're dying to talk about this. We are talking about Imperial Struggle. Imperial Struggle is a 2020 release. It is by designers Ananda Gupta and Jason Matthews. The art is by Roger McGowan, and it is put out by GMT Games. We didn't announce this. We should announce this. We forgot to mention this. GMT Games, shortly after we had our podcast where we were talking about Black Lives Matter, put out a statement. We're not saying in any way, shape, or form that our podcast affected this decision, but if you go to GMT Games and you go to About GMT Games, they have a statement of support for diversity and racial tolerance.
Not for Black Lives Matter.
Not specifically Black Lives Matter, but as we discussed in that thing, in that discussion, Candace and it was very adamant that, they don't need to say specific words, but we do want to know, where you stand in this very difficult time. So,
also worth pointing out, they didn't actually release as a statement. They
Correct.
just updated their About Us section in the dark of night and alerted no one to it. But look, I'm just giving you the facts. You can do what you want.
It's totally true. Listen, my point of view on this is it not everything that we would hope for in a statement by a war game company? Absolutely true. Yeah. But it is a baby step. It is a first.
I'm not giving out cookies, but I'm not slapping wrists.
I totally agree.
It's better than nothing.
To be only the second, and really, let's face it, kind of the first. The only other war game company that has put out a statement has only put out 2 or 3 games in their.
Well, can I just say, because let's just get this out of the way now,
Sure.
Because there may be listeners who are wondering how we're okay with this. So, Imperial Struggle is a game about colonialism. It is a game where colonialism is a major part of the game. There is even something called a slaving contract that is an advantage if you own it in the game. Is this problematic? That's up to you to decide. Here's some things, though, that I will say. Ananda Gupta is a staunch advocate of Black Lives Matter. At least that's what I can deduce by the amount of statements he's made regarding it. He is also... He and Jason Matthews have gone out of their way to give context historically. This is not an abstract wherein slaving contracts is thrown in for no reason. The book has about 20 pages of information on every single part of the game, historical information on it.
28 pages. 28 pages,
yes.
Including a selected bibliography.
So, the game definitely should come with a content and trigger warning for anybody who does not want to partake in the simulation historical recreation of colonialism, especially when something called slaving contracts is an advantage to own in this game. That could be quite upsetting or at least unenjoyable for gamers out there. And it's worth discussing anytime we have a game about colonialism. And one could say this is the mother of all colonialism games because it captures the entire century that was, marked by colonialism.
1697 to 1789 and the global rivalry between Britain and France. Jesse, do you want to give us a sort of the view from 100 feet up on what Imperial Struggle is?
Yeah, well, you said it. It's the 18th century rivalry between France and Britain, and it's played over 6 peace turns and spanning 3 eras and 4 major wars mixed in. The board has got 4 major regions. Obviously, it's the Europe, and then you got North America, the Caribbean, and India. And the spaces are made up of, economic spaces, the markets. You got diplomatic, with the alliances and the prestige. You got militaristic spaces with the forts and the squadrons. Then you got territories, which are only gained through the theaters of war. You have this great debt mechanic. If you need some extra points, you can spend some debt, and then you can pull off that feat you wanted to go for, and.
So it is a card-driven war game, right? So much like Twilight Struggle was a card-driven war game, and we're going to put war in quotes because to a lot of war gamers, this is more like a Euro game, and to a lot of Euro gamers, this is more like a war game. So these games are sort of bridging a gap between these two hobbies, right?
I would say that Twilight Struggle is a card-driven game, and I would say this is a little bit more of a tile-driven game, in the sense that everything revolves
Action selection
around.
driven game.
Yeah,
Yes.
but it's kind of on those tiles, or
Yeah.
those are basically determining what you're going to do on the on
Can I
each
ask
turn.
you a question, Jesse? If you had no idea who the designers of this game were, would you know who the designers of this game were after playing it?
I think it's impossible to answer that question. What do you mean?
Well,
would I know
you
this?
know this was from the same designers as Twilight Struggle?
If you were, if you sat
okay.
down and played this game, would you have said, "Gosh, this really cribs from Twilight Struggle a lot"?
Or this feels like Twilight, yeah.
Well, okay, let's talk about the similarities to Twilight Struggle. Okay, they're both
They're
1v1.
board games.
They're both 1v1 area control, 2 to 4 hour gameplay, right? They both have the tug of war victory point win condition.
2 to 4.
Well, that's what they put 120 to 240 hours.
3 to 6, maybe.
But realistically, yes. But both of them have the tug of war victory point win condition, right? Both have a feeling of evolving. When different cards are introduced from era to era.
Right.
Yep.
Both have this dynamic where each turn presents like a unique focus on where the struggle will take place.
Yeah. Depending on historically that time in a lot of ways.
Right. This Twilight Struggle has got the event cards, and then which scoring cards are still left in play. And Imperial Struggle in this case has the event and ministry cards, and then the award markers, the global demand, the theaters of war. Those are all determining where the struggle focuses.
So
And then you're also gauging that what's going on right now. Where's the struggle focus right now versus the war of the entire game?
right.
And I feel like they both manage AP really well, where
And
with
AP
that
being
focus,
analysis,
you could have so many choices to do in a game like this.
Yeah.
But by focusing on these areas from turn to turn, it helps you cut down on
The camera kind of zooms in on certain sections throughout the game.
Yeah.
narrowing your decision space. Yeah.
Card-driven war games are a fairly recent innovation. One of the very first ones was Mark Simonivich's Hannibal, Rome versus Carthage. And the innovation was, instead of just moving pieces on a board and spending action points and all that sort of stuff, you're playing actual cards. And the cards give you abilities and things that you can do on a given turn, and sometimes give you options and hard choices. And what people found is that they really liked it. There are now tons of card-driven war games because the text on the card is about historical events that happened, and it really does a great job of immersing you in the world, immersing you in the history, and giving a lot of context to the way the game plays out. Twilight Struggle was entirely a card-driven war game in which your action each turn was to play a card and then prosecute that card, to use the points on the card, to use the event on the card, to have to allow the opponent to use the event on the card, and so on and so forth. So everything came from the action of playing that card in one way or another. This game is different. This game has introduced these influence actions, or investment actions, I should say. There are 9 tiles that you will have each and every round of the game, and the tiles range from they all have a major action and a minor action on them. The major action could be between 2 points to spend or 4 points to spend, 2, 3, or 4. And the minor actions always are 2 points. Now, why would you choose an action that has only 2-point major action? Well, because that is going to come with 2 extra benefits. One means that you can play one of your event cards, of which you have a hand of 3, and you can also upgrade one of your military tiles, your war tiles that you have to prosecute the upcoming wars. If you have 3 as your major action, then you don't get to upgrade any of your military tiles, but you do get to take you get to use one of your event cards. So
Let me just say, sorry.
Go ahead,
This is one of my favorite aspects of the game, is looking at these investment tiles when they come out, and looking at what is scarce, and you got some event cards you want to play this turn. Well, how many 2, 3 tokens are out there that allow you to play an event card, or if you need to take
And
control.
do they match the event you want to play? Because some events require you picking an exact tile.
Or like in the last game, me and Tom, we were playing. There was some struggle going on in Europe, and then that next turn there was maybe 2 or 3 diplomatic actions. If you want to take control of Europe, you got to have some diplomatic actions available, and there weren't very many. So I think it's so interesting to keep track of that kind of stuff.
Tremendously. So let's talk about the 3 types of actions. The 3 types of actions you can take are military, economic, and diplomatic. And they differ in this way. Economic actions are used to take over and control markets. Markets are important because there are 6 commodities in the game, and on any given round, there are 3 of those. On any given turn, 3 of those are going to be scored. And so you're going to
demand.
Exactly. You're going to be fighting to have more than your opponent, more markets of that particular type than that, because there are...
And each of those commodities is tied to a specific region, too. They're not spread all out over the world.
Exactly right. Which is, so then we get to the military actions. Military actions are all about building fleets, moving fleets around, which we call squadrons at this point of...
And claiming and repairing forts.
And building and repairing forts. Also, things like buying bonus war tiles, which are going to give you +1, +2, +3 sometimes in different war theaters. Because remember,
+4 goes up to 4.
Oh, there you go. Which are going to give you big bonuses in the upcoming wars that are going to be happening from time to time. And then last but not least, there are diplomatic actions. There are spaces that are solely diplomatic, and those you do not need to chain your way over to something. You can send a diplomat anywhere on the board and affect change there. Europe is almost entirely diplomatic. Almost everything in Europe is solely diplomatic. So you're in a constant diplomatic battle for the control of Europe. There
are no markets and no forts in Europe, but there are 2 places for squadrons.
That's why I said almost. Exactly right. Right. So the game has 3 different types of ways to project your influence and your power on the map. And being able to balance those is an incredible challenge and a real trick. It's kind of a fascinating combination of elements. The next thing we should say is that as we said, there are 6 peace turns and 4 war turns in the game. Interesting thing is that you would normally think that since the peace turns are separated into there's 2 peace turns, and then we switch to the middle era where we add in more cards into the deck. The middle era has 2 more peace turns.
The Empire era.
Correct. And then we go to the Revolution era, which is the last 2 turns of the game when we add even more cards into the deck. Unlike Twilight Struggle, there are not that many cards in this game. There are 15 cards in the Conquest era, 15 cards in the Second era, and 11 cards in the Revolution era. So it's a fairly small deck, which is interesting. Trey has said that he had a problem playing Twilight Struggle because there were so many cards you had to know to play that game well.
That's true.
The whole game is knowing all the cards in the deck and knowing all the possibilities that your foe can have.
And
it's still enjoyable to play the game without knowing the basics. But compared to somebody who knows the game really well. Right.
There's 60 how many 51 cards in the whole game?
41.
Yeah.
41?
Well, 41 event cards. There's 41 event cards in the game. There are also
so manageable.
Yeah, there are also ministry cards, but ministry cards are different because you can see all of your ministry cards all the time, and in each era, you're going to choose 2 of them that you can potentially bring to bear. So the complication here is that you have 2 different types of cards, and they have certain synergies, certain advantages, and learning how to balance and weigh those is a tremendous challenge in the game as well.
Yeah, this to me is, we're jumping ahead a little bit. This to me is one of my favorite aspects of this game in comparison to Twilight Struggle. I think this game has a bigger overhead in terms of understanding it and grokking it. I think this takes a considerable amount more time and effort than understanding Twilight Struggle. But I think you get to a point where you can play this competitively 1,000 hours ahead than you do for Twilight Struggle.
Agreed.
Because there isn't 180 cards you have to, in your head, just know all the possibilities. That's it. 41 cards and each side's little small deck of ministry cards. That's it. Other than that, everything else is on the board.
And there's a thing. So splatter games are often criticized by some people for being a little too tough in the first turn, in the sense that they say you could lose the game in the very first turn of a splatter game. To which Yaron, one of the designers of Splatter, said, "Why would I want to play a game if the first turn doesn't matter?
Why have a first turn?
Why have a first turn if it doesn't matter? If
you can't lose on the first turn." Yeah.
Well, I will tell you that this game, the first turn matters. The first turn, at the end of the first turn, we jump into the first war immediately. So right out of the gate, you're gonna get a
you literally can lose the game at the end of every turn.
Yes,
I heard that may have happened between you guys.
Absolutely.
What it told me was this is not in a lot of games you get a sense of build up and then conflict, build up and then climax. This is not that kind of game. This is a game where you are punching each other in the teeth right from the get-go, and depending and you can be building toward the future, but if you do so, you better watch that victory point marker, and you better see where it's going, because if the other person is sacrificing future board position for current points, they could get you into an untenable position where you're never going to be able to see the rewards of your long-term planning. Which is
there are game-ending victory conditions at the end of every round, which is such an awesome level of tension. Like you do have to plan you do have to plan long term, but you can lose every turn.
Yeah,
I can't think of another game that does that. It's just awesome.
Now, I'm curious. I don't know how many times you guys have played this. I'm in the middle of a game with Tom, but otherwise I've played two full. I still consider them like learning games.
I'm the exact same.
Okay.
I've played 3 games, and I can easily say that these are very early impressions. I mean, this is it'd be the same as if you played 3 games of Twilight Struggle and giving a review on it. So take everything I'm saying with a grain of salt.
So, but I've only played through the end of the third peace turn. So I haven't even seen anything past. I'm curious if either of you have.
I made it to the Revolutionary era, but not to the end. And that was on a solo game.
Well,
it is. Yeah, I have my copy open, and I've been studying the Revolution era cards, and they're amazing. there's some the fact that it goes down to only 11 cards for the last round, because some of the cards you're carrying over into the next round, so you only need 11. It's really you can have a very strong knowledge of, by looking at your cards, what your capabilities are and what
your opponent might have,
and what there's a pretty darn good chance that you have facing you, which is an amazing thing to have in a game that gets that far. It is. There are so many things to factor in when you play this game. For instance, just to start off, you are going to start with 3 event cards. Right, and you look at those 3 event cards, and some of those event cards have a tag on them. They have a word like governance or style or mercantilism. Right, you have a hand of tons of ministry cards, only 5 of which I think you can play in the first era. But those
you only have 5 in every era, except I think the British have 6 in the Revolutionary they can choose from. But you never have more than 5 to choose from, other than that one exception.
And you're going to choose 2 of them. And the reason you're choosing them is that they have strong advantages, and you can flip over those ministry cards at any point to take advantage of what they can do for your empire. But you also have to realize that sometimes the best thing that they can do is to have a word that matches one of your event cards, because when you play an event card that matches your ministry card, that event card now can play its bonus, and some of those bonuses are essentially doubling the effectiveness.
I think all the cards are weighted towards you shouldn't play this without the bonus unless you really have to.
Yes.
Yeah, but I'd also say that some of them are traps.
Yep.
Because that's a sweet bonus, but it may not have anything to do with the current struggle.
Well, and that's the problem too. There's a lot of cards that are punish cards, but if your opponent hasn't done the thing that you need to punish, then it's totally wasted.
Which brings us to the mechanism of debt in the game. Now, You know me. You've heard me talk about Age of Steam. I love debt in games. I think that's one of my favorite things in games. In this game, each player starts off with a debt limit of 4 or 5, somewhere around there.
Six available debt.
Thank you.
Yeah.
6 available debt. You can take debt anytime you want, and it gives you a +1. So if you had 4 diplomatic
For your
actions,
action points.
yes, if you had 4 diplomatic actions to take this turn, and you realize I have 6 points worth of diplomatic actions I need to take. For instance, I need to spend 2 to take your flag off of Austria, and I need to spend another 2 to put mine on, but then I also want to spend 2 to put a diplomatic flag in the prestige space in Ireland. I could do all of that by taking 2 debt.
You even could, on your very first turn, take a 4 diplomatic tile and spend all 6 and have 10 diplomacy to spend in Europe on your first turn. Jesse, tell me why that's probably not a good idea, though.
Why it's not a good idea to spend 10
in
Europe?
Why is it bad?
You mean to spend
on my
debt
first
and do
turn,
it?
why would it be bad to max out my debt?
Oh, well, there's lots of cards that could punish you for that. And if your debt goes all the way up to your debt limit and you take more debt beyond that, those get transferred into victory points for your opponent.
So there are ways of forcing your opponent to take debt, and if you're maxed out, you lose points. It only takes, at the beginning of the game, 15 to lose the game. And there are punish cards, lots of punish cards. All the punish cards in this game punish the person who has less available debt. So they punish pretty hard.
Remember when we said those bonus actions on those event cards? Well, some of them are triggered by matching a word that is on one of your ministry cards. Some of them are triggered by the other person having more debt currently
Less
than
available
you.
debt, yeah.
Yes, less available debt is the way we should put it. When we enter a new age, so remember there are 3 ages in the game, your debt limit goes up by 4, so you increase the amount of debt you can get, but that tug of war between who has less available debt than the other player at any given moment is still completely operational and puts you into a very delicate position very, very quickly.
But then
And it's very hard to lower your debt. Very hard.
Right. But there's also treaty points. So they kind of mix in that dynamic, right? So often treaty points are given to, the player who lost in the theaters of war.
Mm-hmm.
Or won regions.
Right.
Correct.
But you can spend treaty points if you're not, instead of spending your debt. So
Treaty points are debt with no downside.
So let's talk about wars really quick. Let's see. Jesse, would you go over just basically how a war is fought as opposed to how a region is scored during peacetime? Just a sort of an overview.
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, so as far as like scoring the regions, when you do the regional scoring, you're going to start, with each region. You're just count the flags, how many flags you got in the region, and then you're going to get the award marker. You do that with Europe, and then also with Europe, you're going to count how many prestige spaces. That's the only region that has prestige spaces, and you'll get 2 victory points for that. And then you do it with the Caribbean, and then India, and then you get the theaters of war. There's 4 theaters.
Not always. Sometimes there's 3.
Oh, is there? Oh, I didn't get that far. And like in the first war, it is concentrated mostly on Europe. It's like Europe, and there's 1 in North America.
Yeah.
And then in the second one, I'm trying to remember. Oh, I think
Second one is
Europe,
Caribbean
1
and North America and Europe.
right. And so it changes.
I think it's actually India, isn't it? It's not the Caribbean.
Oh, you're right. Third one is there is some India. Yeah, it's conflict markers and squadrons in India. Yeah, and forts. Yeah.
So Europe, North America, and India is the second era. The second
and you got
war.
the ongoing Jacobite rebellion that is, that is a really interesting dynamic.
I hate them. I hate the Jacobites.
So we didn't talk about when you set up for the theaters of war, you're each putting in a random basic war tile, which is going to range anywhere from -1 to +2, mostly in the 0s and 1s range. And then some of the lower tiles will have some sort of bonus to them since they're low, like remove a flag from this particular region, or remove a squadron or a fort, or damage a fort. That's how you damage a fort. And then you can also spend military points during peace turns to add bonus tiles to any of these regions if there's a particular one that you're fighting for. And so you're going to count these bonus tiles, the tiles, the basic war tiles, the bonus tiles for each theater. But then the theater's also going to list out which alliances or for maybe that region is if there's conflict markers or if you have forts or squadrons in that region. So you're going to count all of those to see who is going to win that theater of war, and that person's going to get victory points, and then they're going to get control points. And control points allow you to take territories.
Conquest points, yes.
You're right. Yes, yeah, conquest points. That allow you to take territories on the map that otherwise are unavailable, through
This is
peace.
the only time in the game that those can switch hands.
Yeah, and then this is also where the person who loses a theater will get some treaty points.
And those conflict points can also, conquest points can also be used to flip control of forts, which are incredibly hard to take any other way, and things like that.
Yeah,
So,
and conquest points can take anything. You could literally, for one conquest point, you can take anything you want on that tile, in addition to the territories listed as available territories for conquer.
This is a really fascinating rule that I have yet to have seen exercised, but that if somebody has a conquest point and they want to take over your territory, you can refuse.
Yep.
Je refuse, monsieur. I
You
will
can do
not
it twice per war,
Yep.
and the first time you would suffer 3
points.
3 points, and the second time you would suffer 5. So you could
8 points, you probably
8
lose the
points.
game. But there are
That exists.
definitely territories that if you lose would probably be worth 3 points to you as long as you can suffer it.
I could see losing 8 victory points if
If it meant you were going to get an instant victory on the next round.
exactly.
Yeah, I'm curious, like what
If you
situation
were
would
going to
actually
win,
be on
you
board with
didn't
that?
care about points. Yeah.
I think
Points was your victory condition.
I think refusing the first one and losing 3 points, I can totally get that. Refusing 5 more points, I think is crazy.
These territories are key footholds in these regions, and if you lose them, there's chances that you could actually just be out of that region. I mean, like if somebody plans correctly, you might never be able to get back into that region, at least until the next war.
Yeah. So
It can be.
I want to. We've talked about a whole bunch of different things. I want to bring it back down to a player experience right now. I'm just going to talk through sort of what my mindset would be when I begin a turn of this game. First thing I'm doing is I'm drawing those 3 new event cards. And if I have any event cards in my hand, I'm going to have to discard back down to 3. So I'm looking at what do they do? What areas, what regions of the board do they affect? What advantage do they connect with in terms of the ministry cards that I have?
Right. Wait, and actually, I love that you're doing this. I would say right before that, I would be looking at where are the award markers, just very basic.
Sure,
where
yeah.
are the award markers going to be on the board? Like they range from 0 to 3, and then also what's the global demand look like? So the global demand is there's not going to be any fish or tobacco being fought over in Europe, but that's going to determine how much energy is going to go into North America or the Caribbean or India. So that's just, I would say that as a base, I would probably, kind of get a feel for that. And then I would go look at the event and the ministry cards.
Sure. And then I'm going to look at the investment tiles because when I take my turn, the first thing I'm going to do is choose one investment tile, and that's the tile I'm going to play. Those are the ones that say the primary action on this is 3 military actions, and the secondary is 2 diplomacy actions. Or this one is 4 economic actions and 2 military actions as the backup. And the one that had 3, that also allows me to play an event card and so on and so forth. And I'm looking for the synergies. I'm also looking at, of those 9 investment tiles that are out there, what isn't there, right? Like, wow, holy cow, look at it. 6 of those, their primary actions are diplomatic, which means there are only 3 of those tiles that have non-diplomatic actions as their primary action. boy, oh boy, if any of those are important to me, I better grab them as quick as I possibly can. But that's going to affect the way my turn goes. It's going to affect the order in which I'm probably going to have to play things in an order that I'm not really crazy about playing in, right? Then I have to look at the board. Look, we are both one space away from this fort. Whoever builds that fort first is going to have a huge advantage, because once a fort is built, taking over that fort becomes super, super hard, right?
And initiative goes to the person who is losing on the victory point battle. And almost in some ways, we should say that initiative doesn't mean that the person goes first. It means they choose who goes first.
That's right.
Oh, and that is the most exciting decision maybe in the whole game. It's
Because, I mean, look, as Tom is saying, it's like you got to get to that fort first. It's super important. But also imagine that
you want to go last.
You want to go last because you go, all right, look at all these struggles. And now
you decide what happens.
He doesn't get to respond to me now. I can now choose which one of these I want to tip over the scale.
Right. Yeah. But I mean, deciding who goes first and who goes last is so not a scripted decision. It's dependent on everything on the board.
It is absolutely. And I have a predilection toward going first in this game. And yet, every time I do, the last action
devastating to you.
Killing me. It's just killing me because I can't do anything about it. And all of a sudden, I thought I had more markets in tobacco, and I thought I had more markets in fish, and all of a sudden, boom! They are winning in tobacco. They're tied in fish now, and with their two little minor military actions, they've totally killed my chances in such and such a place. I
feel like this is a personal thing you're talking about right now.
Yeah, you think so?
This
is that
exactly
right?
what happened with us. Yeah,
that is what happened with us.
Because those forts, especially the ones in North America, are so wildly important. But both of them you're 2 turns away from getting them with market builds or with squadron builds. So it's so interesting because it's like, you still, going first, still, it means you're the first one to be able to start that process of working your way towards the forts.
Can I say something else? The investment tiles, interesting dynamic. So each turn, you're going to have the 9 of these tiles. I believe there's 21 of them or 24.
Something like that, yes.
Right? Okay, so but the point is,
24.
There's a set amount of these that are kind of mixed up, right? Like probably evenly. But you're going to have 9 come out, and then you're going to set those aside next turn, and you're going to have a new 9 come out. Okay.
Yeah, you'll see them all.
But you won't see them all. You won't see.
You'll see 18 out of 24.
You'll see most of them.
18 out of 24. That's right.
Right, and then you mix them together. So it's just interesting to know that when you
you don't put out those last 3 and then shuffle the rest.
The 6.
You shuffle them all back together.
Interesting. Okay, got it.
So you can't totally math everything out, which I kind of like.
Yeah.
But you can somewhat predict, there's been a lot of these out. There's been a lot of diplomatic action pretty scarce later, but you won't know precisely. But anyway, I like the way that they balance that.
Absolutely. So I think we've given a pretty good overview of the game and the way it is. Listen, as Matt said, we have only begun to scratch the surface of a very deep, very involved game. But I certainly think we you know when you know, right? And I think all 3 of us know this is something special. This is something. I hope you're hearing the excitement in our voices. I think we're all recognizing this very well might be a classic that might even be better than Twilight Struggle. And since Twilight Struggle is in several of our top 10, top 5, top 3 list of games of all time, that is saying something, right? What do you guys think?
I'm happy to say that I love Twilight Struggle and I love this game. That this is like we just started dating, me and this game, but I like where it's going. And this does not replace Twilight Struggle for me.
No.
They're different. They're different enough.
So that's what's really interesting to me is that I really expected I was just getting Twilight Struggle with a new theme and maybe a couple new mechanics. If you like Twilight Struggle, I have no idea whether you're going to like Imperial Struggle. They have nothing to do with each other, really, in terms of like how it feels or if you'll like it. I genuinely don't know. It's to me, like I said before, learning this game is almost exponentially more complicated learning Twilight Struggle. I could almost teach anyone Twilight Struggle. There's like 5 people I would ever even consider teaching Imperial Struggle to. I think this is a much bigger overhead and a lot harder to grok. Just like, why am I doing anything until you've played at least a game of it or a couple rounds? But I think once you grok the game, you can start playing competitively and really enjoy the full facet of the game so much faster than you can in Twilight Struggle because of the, just the huge ask of memorizing 180 or whatever cards.
So this is the fascinating thing. So I don't know where I saw this, but I saw some promotional ad by GMT, I believe, that was saying that this game is this is the follow-up to Twilight Struggle, but we didn't want this game to feel as long, and we wanted to make it simple. We wanted to keep the sort of like its simple rules, and you can play it within a night. And they said they actually had a visual scale of how weighty this game was, how difficult it was, and it was scored 1.8. And they actually had a bar that was like, here's how low it is on this bar, so you can visualize how easy this game is to learn. And I was like, wow, I'm going to guess that that's not totally accurate.
Well, no, but in comparison to GMT
wait.
games, right?
Yeah,
What?
it's only compared to other GMT games, really.
Oh, I don't know. I'm not sure if that was saying. Okay, maybe it was. I don't know.
Maybe.
But I will say that it's. I could explain the overview of the game, and I have, and people get that. The problem is in the fiddliness of. Yeah. There's a lot of exceptions.
Yep.
So many exceptions.
That.
Oh, I mean, we didn't even talk about what isolation is, or isolated markets, or protected markets,
or the limitations of minor actions, and so on and so forth. Yeah.
There's so many complicated little tiny edge cases.
Yeah.
American flags, Spanish flags, Jacobite. I mean, it gets crazy.
So I've actually made a list of the most common rules that we got hung up on. And this actually also forced me to seek out the answers to them.
Yeah.
I'm curious, actually, Matt, since I haven't played with you, what were some of what's like the biggest rule that you kind of got hung up on?
Isolated markets and daisy chaining. So daisy chaining took me a while to understand. You can daisy chain a squadron into a market. You can daisy chain a fort into a market. You can never daisy chain a market into a market. That stuff I just had to memorize. What an isolated market is and what it means, and when isolation actually kicks in and when it erases. What a conflict marker allows me to do, what a conflict marker costs to remove if it's next to a fort, whereas it's not. Those are just things I had to memorize.
Right.
Yeah. There's a lot to it. But at the end of the day, this is a game that I read the rule book and I learned the game from reading the rule book. I read the rule book twice.
Same. And
I learned the game. That's how I learned it. I'm not crazy about
let's
any
just
of the...
say thank you, GMT, for putting in the playthrough, which I think is really the playbook.
Agreed.
Which walks you through a whole turn of it.
Agreed.
I actually set it up on my table with my physical copy and worked through the playbook, and that really helped me understand the game.
Yeah, I don't think this is a perfect rule book, but I think it is quite good and quite serviceable. And, even though it is tough, even though there are a lot of difficult things to learn for a Eurogamer in this, I think for a Wargamer, this may be easy peasy. But I don't.
There's a great player aid on BGG I would recommend. I actually feel like I wouldn't have fully grokked it without it. It's the only player aid at the moment. It's called Imperial Struggle Player Aid. It does a really good job of it. Also, sadly, there is some pretty important errata that we need to know about that is also in the file section of BGG. The most glaring and important being that
Spain.
There are 2 spaces in Spain that give you bonuses towards war that were just misprints on the map and say they don't, but you wouldn't count them in that war, and they're wildly important. So
Which
some
ones?
people have... The 2 alliance spaces in Spain should give bonuses for the 3rd war, and on the map they don't have 3 dots. So, but that's huge. I mean, it's
but
huge.
it is mentioned on the it's mentioned on the war card. So it is there.
But you wouldn't know that there's 2 of them there.
Correct.
To count.
Correct. You wouldn't be able to tell that, but you would know something's up because you wouldn't see it.
I noticed one of the problems has been sometimes knowing at a glance like you can tell what a diplomatic space is. They're diamond shaped. But then like what's the difference between an alliance and a prestige? Okay, well the prestige has a green border to it, right? Yeah. And then like alliances say alliance, right? Okay, but then there's also alliances with like the privateers or the Iroquois, not to be confused with those, right? So
those are alliances that exist outside of Europe. Yeah, right. Any alliance space, any prestige space, any diplomatic space outside of Europe is called a local alliance.
Right,
also
right,
things you
right.
have to memorize.
Sure, right.
Yeah. Because there are cards that say remove a flag from a local alliance, and you'd have to be like, what the hell's a local alliance?
Right. And then there's places like Sweden, which is both an alliance and prestige.
The only one.
And then it looks like Russia is too.
No, Russia is not. Russia's only one.
No, there is one in Prussia that comes about in the Empire
right now.
Age.
Russia says alliance, and it has a green border. I'm looking at it right now. And then here's the thing: when we were playing on a Vassal the other night, I was mousing over Austria on the bottom right, which I always, it's a prestige space. But when you mouse over it in Vassal, it says it's an alliance and prestige.
Huh.
And I don't see any dots. I don't see the word alliance. And so I'm not sure what that is.
Which is incorrect? Is the map incorrect, or is the mouse over incorrect? Interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting. Look,
I want to. This is what you get when you buy a GMT game early. You get it 2 years before the second version, where they fix everything. But you have to maybe pull out your Sharpie and fix some things on the map.
I own my first edition Twilight Struggle, and there are countries that are misprinted. The misspelled countries on a world map, which was crazy. But let's not lose the thread here. I kind of disagree with you a little bit, Matt, in that I do not agree that this game feels tremendously different than Twilight Struggle. I think it is a very different game. Don't get me wrong. But if you play Twilight Struggle and you love Twilight Struggle, I think you do have a fairly good chance of loving this game. I think
Agreed.
that you are at least 50% of the way there. Just at least in the sense of it is a 2-player head-to-head battle where you are fighting over various territories, and there are 6 different things that could give you a 1, 2, or 3 point edge. It is the scoring mechanism is a tug of war. So if anyone gets to plus 15 or minus 15,
I don't know.
It shares so much.
I don't think this will be anywhere near as big of a seller as Twilight Struggle, nor do I think it will ever get anywhere near as high on the rankings on BGG. Maybe I'm wrong.
No, but I agree with that.
I think this is a much bigger ask than Twilight Struggle for most gamers, and I don't think you can teach this to half as many gamers as you can teach Twilight Struggle. I also think the theme is less exciting to people.
I think that's true. I think that is true.
That being said, I think this is the superior game, and one does not replace the other, but it's early to say. I already enjoy this more than I've ever enjoyed Twilight Struggle, and I've enjoyed the hell out of Twilight Struggle.
Jesse and I are struggleistas. We are huge Twilight Struggle fans, so you're not going to hear that from, I'm going to say for Jesse, I don't think so, but definitely for me, I'm not going to say I prefer this to Twilight Struggle in any way, shape, or form. All I'll say is that I am having the same feelings of just joy and, frankly, awe playing this game in the early days. Exactly the same feelings that I had in the early days of playing Twilight Struggle.
And it feels, I know I broached this at the beginning, but it feels odd to be so in love with a game with a theme that I feel like I would have sworn off for anybody else at this time in my life.
Yeah.
And with the way the board game community is going and the way the world is changing, I'm not looking for games about colonialism. In fact, I am wildly turned off by them. But, one of the designers being a person of color, knowing their stance on these issues, knowing that they have the same concerns and fears about colonialism as a theme, it helps. It makes it, I'm not saying that it coats the medicine or whatever at all, but it definitely, at least I know that the person designing this is not somebody who's pushing for a revisionist history of or a whitewashing of colonialism. And I appreciate that they went out of their way in the rule book to give as much historical context. And I don't feel like I'm LARPing a colonialist. I think there's such a giant bird's eye view that instead I'm experiencing historically this 100 years of time, which was wildly, unfortunately, marked by colonialism.
Right. I mean, it would be sort of a disservice to pretend slavery didn't exist, right?
Well, nobody wants that, but I think people are saying, can we stop making games about slavery?
Yeah. Listen, playing.
Nobody's saying we want a game that pretends it didn't exist. They're just saying, can we stop making games about it?
I don't know why that I had a problem a little bit playing Maracaibo, but I don't have a problem playing this. But I think what it comes down to is that this is clearly a game that is about history, and it's steeped in history, and it is about historical accuracy. There's
nothing abstract about this game.
No, it is. It is not. It is not. And I feel like when you do that, when you pull all of because there can be nothing prurient in it. There can be nothing that is rah-rah anything. This is kind of playing through a historical period. I think that the dispassionate nature of the game, for me, is what saves a lot of those criticisms, at least the way I feel personally. Now I'm saying this as a cis hetero white man, and I'm not the person that that this is necessarily going to push my buttons. Except that when I played Mombasa and those other games, I did have a twinge of I'm not crazy.
I think
about
there's
this,
something about playing a specific person, in these settings, as opposed to playing a global power spanning 100 years and many different regimes. I don't know, somehow by pulling it out, it feels more like a history book as opposed to a history simulation.
Yeah. Let's just say this is a go. Sorry, Jesse, were you going to say something?
No, go ahead, Jesse.
I was just going to. I wanted to go back to the fiddly rules and sort of
please
provide clarifications. But if there's something else you want to say in that, what you were discussing, that's fine.
I do want to wrap this up because we're running low on time. So I'm going to give you the final word, Jesse.
Oh, okay. Well, I was just going to discuss the other rules, like the protection with forts and squadrons. Like we had a question about does a fort or squadron protect other forts and squadrons?
Markets only.
Right, it's markets only. That's right. But it was hard to find some of these answers simply. And the question of major and minor actions, when does it cost something to? I mean, I know the answer to this now, but it was hard to find the answer.
I had to go to BTG rules a lot. I went through the forum. I read every single rules post in that forum to sort of test myself.
The basic idea is that if you're going to split your actions, like if you have 4 points to spend as a diplomatic action, if you spend, I sort of gave the answer there. But the question is, if you spread your points over different regions, you have to suffer a point penalty. But the question is, when does that occur?
Not in military, but yes, in the other areas. Yes.
Oh, it's not in military?
It's not in military. Military can spend anywhere.
We're all learning stuff today. I know there's still little rules. There's still little.
Look, I don't want to get. Yeah, I think we've already kind of covered the fact that there is some fiddliness in this, and there's some complication, and there are some errata that are unfortunate, but are going to need to be out there.
You have to want to learn this game. It's work,
but it's not incredible amount of work. I mean, I read the rule book twice and was 80% able to play the game with a few things that I had to figure out. So it's not impossible. It's, to me, the juice is worth the squeeze. It is worth.
Oh yeah, 100%. There's so much juice here,
effort.
but a lot of squeeze. I will go farther than Tom and say I will warn off anyone to really check this out. If you love Twilight Struggle, don't just buy this, because this might sit on your shelf forever. Really, this is, and maybe it's just me, I think this is wildly more complicated than Twilight Struggle.
And I think
for me, at least.
Yeah, and I think that if you love Twilight Struggle, you're already halfway to understanding this game. The other half is going to be more work than you expect, but if you're a hardcore Twilight Struggle player, you're ready for this. You're ready.
I couldn't agree with you more, though, that the juice is worth the squeeze here. This is, I'm going to call it right now. I'd be shocked if something beats this as my game of the year. Shocked.
Yeah. This is my barrage from, of this year.
That's how I feel. This is last year's
barrage. I like
barrage.
this a lot more. I like this a lot more than barrage, actually. A lot more.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah. But also,
I will say that if I'm going to...
games is a lot rarer for me than anything else.
But I will say barrage might be a little easier to go, put this on the table, we'll get this done tonight.
Sure. Well, this is also a 2-player game, so you're not going to be playing it at a game night. This is a destination event, right? You have to have the right person at the right time and
I think
choose to do it.
Two people who have played this many times together will be lucky to get this done in 3 hours.
Yeah, and let's also say that Vassal. We have never really talked about Vassal here. Vassal is a way to play this game online. One of the great things about it is that you can play a round, you can play a turn, and then you can save your game, and you can come back and play it in a couple days or
you can also do play by email, where it will record all of your moves, and then you send that file to your opponent, and they can see what you just did, and you can pick up from there.
And the implementation on Vassal is fantastic.
Yeah, it's great. I will say I
even
can't
count
wait
your
till the app.
flags.
What were you saying, Jesse?
I can't wait till the proper app for this comes out.
Well, we have no idea. It totally depends on sales. Playdeck has not even started considering it, so we're years out even at best.
I'm putting it out there.
No, the designer discussed it. He said Playdeck has no plans to do this, but if it's a massive success like Twilight Struggle, I'm sure they'll think about it.
Make the app.
Years away at best. If they start tomorrow, you're years away.
Play it tomorrow on Vassal. Go forth. If this sounds interesting to you, jump out and get it. This is something truly special.
Most P500 pre-orders in GMT history, I believe.
That's true.
Did anybody listen to our review of Barrage and go, all right, I'll go get this game? They gushed about it so much. Did anybody go get that game, then play it, and then go, no, they were wrong? No,
probably
maybe in terms of the quality of the components, but I think most people.
We acknowledge that, but we gushed about the game, and I don't think we disappointed anybody who actually went out and bought the game and played it.
This is more niche than that, I think, but yeah.
What I've noticed about our audience is that they're varied and people. There's always somebody that has a contrary opinion about virtually any game that we recommend. I think that's great, but yes, I think your point is made.
Hey, if you enjoyed that video, you very well might enjoy the other videos you now see being suggested to you on screen. Also, we'd greatly appreciate it if you could like, share, or subscribe to our Game Brain channel. Thanks so much.